I'm Laura Bennett, 33 years old, and 3 months ago, I thought I was living the dream. My company had just been valued at $85 million. I had a home overlooking Lake Travis, and I was married to the man I thought was my biggest supporter. One Tuesday morning, I picked up our shared tablet to check the weather and saw an email open on the screen. It was from a divorce attorney I'd never heard of, with my name listed as the defendant. By the time I finished reading, I knew he'd been planning to leave me for 8 months. Every kiss, every whispered "I love you," every shared vision for the future was part of a strategy to take half of everything I had built. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from, and if you've ever built something from scratch, only to have someone try to take it, go ahead and hit subscribe. I was raised just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. My dad was a high school science teacher, and my mom worked at the town library. We didn't have much, but they gave me what mattered: honesty, hard work, and the belief that if you put your name on something, it better stand for something. I grew up watching my dad fix things that no one else would bother with, and my mom always said, "The world doesn't need more shortcuts. It needs more people who care." I studied chemical engineering at Oklahoma State and went straight into the manufacturing world. My first job was at a major company in San Antonio, formulating heavy-duty cleaning products for industrial use. They worked, no doubt, but every time I signed off on one of those formulas, knowing what we were releasing into the environment, I felt sick. I kept thinking there had to be a better way to clean without hurting the world we live in. So I started experimenting at night. In my garage with old buckets and cheap ingredients, I tried to build something that could do the job without toxic chemicals. It took me a year and a half of ruined batches, sour smells, and late nights before I got it right. But when I did, it worked better than anything I'd ever seen. That was the start of Clear Path Solutions. I quit my job, cashed out my savings, and moved into a studio apartment so I could rent a small production space. The first couple of years were brutal. I was hand-mixing every gallon driving across Texas in a beat-up van, begging restaurants and small businesses to give me a chance. Most said no. Some laughed, but one didn't. A regional diner chain tested my degreaser in their kitchens. Within a week, they placed orders for all 20 locations. Word got around fast. Within 6 months, we had contracts with over 50 restaurants. I hired my first employee, Angela Wills, who became not just my CFO, but my closest ally. The company grew in stages. Year 3, we moved into a real facility in Austin. Year 4, we hit retail shelves. By year 6, we were pulling in over $30 million a year and expanding into industrial manufacturing office buildings and eco-conscious hospitality chains. What made us different was simple. Our products worked. They were cheaper to produce, and they were safe. People noticed. That's when I met Kevin. We were both speaking at a sustainability conference in Colorado, me about chemical innovation, him about marketing strategies for green startups. He was smart, easy to talk to, and didn't once bring up money or my company's valuation. We talked about ethics, the future of clean manufacturing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone saw me, not just my success. Our relationship moved quickly. Within a year, Kevin had moved to Austin, taken a job with a local agency, and proposed during a hike in Big Bend. He said he admired how I'd built something meaningful, that he'd never known a woman like me. We married that fall in a quiet ceremony at our home overlooking the lake. Angela stood beside me as my maid of honor. Kevin slipped right into our world, attending company events, asking thoughtful questions, even suggesting marketing ideas that actually helped. For a while, it felt like a true partnership, but things shifted gradually. He started asking about profit shares, intellectual property, which assets were in my name. It wasn't obvious at first. It was small things. Shouldn't we share more of the financial stuff, or wouldn't it be simpler if we just had joint access? I thought he was trying to build trust. I thought that's what marriage meant. Turns out he was building a case. And when the Henderson deal came along, a licensing partnership that would change everything for ClearPath, Kevin's interest reached new levels. That morning with the tablet was just the beginning. What I found on that screen wasn't just a plan to leave me. It was a blueprint to dismantle everything I had poured my soul into for nearly a decade, and he thought I'd never see it coming. Kevin never questioned the Henderson trip to Dallas. In fact, he insisted on coming along, said he wanted to celebrate the next chapter of our lives. I let him stand beside me during the signing, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder while the cameras clicked. I signed the partnership deal that would push ClearPath Solutions past the $90 million mark, and the man next to me believed he was one step closer to cashing in on half of it. He smiled, for every photo complimented my negotiation skills, toasted with our team at dinner, and charmed the Henderson execs like he'd been part of the process all along. To them, he was the proud husband of a rising businesswoman. But I already knew the truth, what he'd been planning behind closed doors, and who he planned to spend that money with. The next morning, I didn't hear it from Kevin. I heard it from David. Laura, he said, Robert Sterling just filed. Expect a process server today. It wasn't a surprise, not really. But when that man walked into my office and handed me the papers, it still took something out of me. Angela was sitting across from me reviewing quarterly projections. She knew as soon as I set the envelope down. "Do you want me to step out?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, stay." The petition read like a blueprint. Kevin was claiming rights to half of the company's growth during our marriage. That included the patents, licensing agreements, and projected royalties from the Henderson deal. They estimated his claims somewhere north of $50 million. And then came the part that made my stomach turn. Kevin wasn't just asking for money, he was taking credit. The filing argued that his emotional support, combined with his strategic marketing input, were vital to ClearPath's success. Robert Sterling claimed that Kevin's presence at home created a foundation for my work to flourish. He called it sweat equity, said Kevin deserved to be compensated for giving up his own ambitions so mine could thrive. I called Rachel that afternoon. I didn't even have to explain. He filed, I said yes. She was at my office within an hour, arms crossed and eyes scanning the paperwork. He actually had the nerve to call it support. After everything, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When I walked through the front door that evening, Kevin was already waiting. He was holding a bottle of champagne and a bouquet of sunflowers. My favorite. "Thought we should celebrate," he said like nothing had changed. "You've earned it." I set my keys down slowly. "We need to talk." He tilted his head, trying for a concerned expression. "I know. That's actually what I wanted to. I know everything." His face changed instantly. The fake concern vanished. What replaced it was something harder, more calculating. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've seen every email, the ones you sent to Sterling, the ones to Lisa, the receipts, the hotel bookings, the plans you made." He didn't deny it, didn't blink, just narrowed his eyes. "How long have you known long enough to be ready?" Kevin stepped back, arms crossed. "You think knowing changes the law? It doesn't. Texas is community property. Everything you built while we were married belongs to both of us." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. "You should talk to Sterling again," I said. He pulled out his phone and disappeared into the hallway. I listened as he spoke in a low, clipped voice. A few minutes later, he returned. His tone had shifted, but not his stance. "Sterling says it doesn't change anything. You can't just move things around to keep them from me. Judges see through that. You always did underestimate me." Kevin's mouth twitched, but he didn't respond. "You thought I'd be too heartbroken to act," I said, "that I'd crumble under pressure, that you'd surprise me and walk away with half of everything. But while you were planning your exit, I was protecting what's mine. Every asset, every patent, every contract. You hid assets." He snapped. "No, I documented value. I restructured. I safeguarded. Every move was legal, every change backed by board minutes and business rationale. I didn't cheat, I defended. His eyes darted around the room. I could see him recalculating. Lisa warned me, he muttered. She said you'd figure it out. I stepped closer. Let's talk about Lisa. I have the receipts, jewelry, hotels, dinners, every charge run through our business cards. You didn't just lie, Kevin. You stole. That stopped him. How long were you watching us long enough to know you were counting on my trust to pay for her plane tickets? He stared at the floor for a long time, then looked up, trying a different tone. We can settle this without dragging it out. We don't have to destroy each other in court. I picked up the glass of water I'd left on the counter earlier that day. Destroy, I said. You already tried. He ran a hand through his hair. What do you want? I want you to leave. And the settlement, I want you to understand that you don't get to take what you never built. Kevin left the next morning with just a suitcase and the car he'd been driving. He didn't touch the watch collection or the tailored suits. Maybe he realized those were part of the illusion, too. Lisa didn't show up to work that day. Rachel said word was spreading fast around their agency. Their secret wasn't a secret anymore. Later that week, David called. Sterling wanted to talk. Looks like the tone's shifting, David said. They're realizing this isn't going to be as simple as they planned. The first offer came in high $25 million and a slice of future licensing income. David's response was short. My client is open to discussing actual community assets. Beyond that, we'll see you in court. The number dropped, from 25 to 15, from 15 to 5. The more they discovered how we'd structured things, the smaller the offer got. In the end, Kevin accepted $2 million. He kept his car, a few personal items, and his share of the equity we had built together, what little of it there actually was. There were no royalties, no claims to future income, no ownership of ClearPath. He had spent 8 months planning to take half. He walked away with less than 3%. Next came the hearings, discovery, depositions. That's where the story really fell apart. Because when David asked Kevin to describe his role in the business, what patents he'd contributed to what strategies he'd led, he couldn't answer. He talked about emotional support and sacrifice. But when confronted with receipts, emails, and timelines, none of it held up. And when the affair came up, Kevin had no defense, just silence. 3 months after he filed, the divorce was finalized. I didn't just keep my company, I kept the future he had tried to steal. The personal cost was heavy. I lost weight, slept in shifts. There were weeks I forgot what peace felt like, but ClearPath kept growing. The Henderson deal outperformed projections, and our valuation climbed even higher. As for Kevin, well, his name wasn't spoken much after that. And Lisa, she wasn't seen at the agency again. I wasn't thinking about either of them when I stepped onto that stage 6 weeks later, holding the award for sustainable innovation. I was thinking about something else entirely. After the final papers were signed, Kevin didn't say much. He packed up his things in 2 hours flat and drove off in silence. The quiet after he left wasn't peaceful, not at first. It was too quiet. The house echoed differently. His shoes were gone from the front closet. The toothpaste sat untouched on his side of the sink. I kept expecting the front door to open, but it never did. I still showed up to work every day. I still met with my leadership team, reviewed supplier contracts, and handled product strategy. But there was a pause behind everything, like my brain was doing 2 jobs running the company and holding in something that hadn't quite hit the surface yet. Angela noticed first. Laura, you haven't touched your lunch? I looked down. My sandwich was still in the wrapper, sitting exactly where she'd placed it. I'd been staring out the window for 20 minutes. Sorry, I said. I just forgot. The meetings continued. The production targets were hit. The Henderson team sent over their second quarter projections. All of it kept moving, and I kept showing up. But at night, I'd sit in the living room after everyone else had gone home, just listening to the fridge hum. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't turn on music. Some nights, I couldn't remember how I'd gotten from the garage to the sofa. Rachel started texting every morning. "You up? Breakfast today. You're not alone. Okay?" When I didn't answer for 2 days, she came over without asking. Brought coffee, walked through the door like she still had a key. I must have looked worse than I realized because she didn't say anything right away. Just hugged me and sat down at the table. "I'm worried about you." I nodded. "You don't have to talk. I just need you to eat something while I sit here." I heated up a muffin and half listened while she talked about her cousin's wedding and a neighbor's kitchen remodel. She didn't push, and I was grateful. At the office, Angela picked up where Rachel left off. She filled my calendar with just enough tasks to keep me moving. She rerouted calls when I looked too tired to pick up the phone. She made sure I never sat too long in the same place. The strangest part was that Kevin kept texting. Neutral messages, formal even, just confirming the statement for the investment account. "Can you forward the car title when you have a moment? Let me know if I left my laptop charger in the hallway drawer." No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just short bursts of unfinished business like we were colleagues wrapping up a project. I answered what I had to. The rest, I ignored. ClearPath's Q3 board meeting came and went. I presented numbers, reviewed projections, and answered every question. No one would have guessed I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. I'd learned to wear more makeup. I smiled when I needed to. I said the right things, but the silence inside me didn't go away. At night, I found myself replaying moments I hadn't thought about in years. The first investor who said yes, the road trips across Texas in my beat-up van, Angela bringing folding chairs to our first office because we couldn't afford real ones yet, Kevin showing up to our holiday parties shaking hands like he'd earned something, and then the moment I'd found the email, I didn't cry about it. That surprised me. I cried over other things, missing my mom seeing a mother and daughter laughing at the grocery store watching a movie I'd seen 20 times, but not over him. The thing that came closest to breaking me was a dinner with one of our newest suppliers, a woman from Illinois named Jackie, who ran a sustainable paper packaging plant. We were sitting at a long table, and someone asked how she'd gotten into the business. Jackie smiled and said, "Oh, my husband and I started it together. We work side by side." Just like that, I felt something shift behind my ribs. I excused myself to the restroom and locked the door behind me. I didn't cry there either. I just stood at the sink for 5 full minutes holding onto the counter until my breathing evened out. That was when I realized the damage hadn't been loud. It wasn't in the betrayal. It was in the part of me that had stopped trusting my own instincts. The part that now second-guessed every kind word, every new business partner, every person who said, "I believe in your mission." I didn't trust belief anymore. I told Rachel that over lunch a few days later. "I know," she said, "but that'll pass. When I don't know." "But it will." She pulled something from her purse and slid it across the table. It was a flyer for a conference in Santa Fe Women in Sustainability Leadership. Panels, roundtables, small group discussions. I scanned the list of speakers. Why this? Because you need to hear voices that aren't your own right now. I tucked it into my bag without promising anything. At home, I started leaving the windows open again. I let the house get quiet and didn't try to fill it. Some nights I made soup just for myself and actually sat at the table. I didn't feel better, but I didn't feel worse. That was something. Angela came into my office one morning holding a thick file. "Want me to handle this vendor dispute?" I looked up. "No, let me take it." She nodded once, then set it on my desk. The file was a mess. Wrong pricing tiers, missed delivery dates, 3 months of unresolved email threads. I sorted it out by noon. It felt good, solid, like something I still understood. That weekend I registered for the Santa Fe conference. I didn't know it then, but that would be the turning point. Not because something big happened there, but because it was the first thing I chose for myself that had nothing to do with defense or damage control. It wasn't about Kevin, or court, or fixing what had been broken. It was just about beginning again. The flight to Santa Fe was short, just over an hour from Austin, but I felt like I'd traveled farther than that. The conference was held at a quiet Adobe-style resort just outside the city, surrounded by cottonwoods and open sky. No billboards, no traffic. No reminders of Kevin or court filings or asset divisions, just quiet and sun. I checked in late afternoon. The woman at the registration table handed me a schedule and name tag and a canvas tote with the event's logo, Women Moving Forward. That night's welcome dinner was optional. I went anyway. The dining room was warm and simple. Big wooden beams stretched across the ceiling. Tables were set in clusters, and the windows looked out onto a fading orange sky. I chose a seat near the edge of the room and nodded politely to the women at my table. Most were older than me. A few were founders. One ran a clean energy startup in Kansas. Another led a community farming co-op outside Denver. No one asked what had brought me there. They just welcomed me like I belonged. The first full day began with a session called Sustainable Structure Building What Lasts. I almost skipped it. I'd heard versions of it before, but something about the title pulled me in. The speaker was a woman in her 50s named Margaret Choate. She'd spent 30 years building an independent logistics firm and now consulted for mission-driven startups. She didn't talk about buzzwords or branding. She talked about risk, redundancy, legal shields, financial firewalls. She spoke in terms I understood. At one point she said, "Your values are your foundation, but your structure is your guardrail. If you don't know exactly who owns what, you're already exposed." I took out my notebook. After the session, I introduced myself. Margaret shook my hand and said, "Let me guess you've already learned this lesson the hard way." I nodded once. She gave me her card. "You ever need a second set of eyes on a restructuring plan, give me a call." That night, I went back to my room and opened the company's equity breakdown on my laptop. I'd already done a lot during the divorce, moved intellectual property into a holding entity, revised internal agreements, locked down board controls. But for the first time, I saw the whole system with a different lens, not through fear, through foresight. I stayed up until midnight mapping out potential vulnerabilities, drafting a plan to reclassify the licensing income, and flagging 3 areas of exposure in our contractor agreements. None of it was urgent. All of it was smart. When I returned to Austin, I met with Angela and laid out what I wanted to change. "We're restructuring again," she asked, flipping through my notes. "Just the back end," I said. "We're not reacting this time. We're planning." She smiled. "Welcome back." We brought in a tax attorney named Celia from Houston. She reviewed everything with sharp, calm precision. We formed a new Delaware LLC to manage the licensing revenue, gave ClearPath a long-term lease on its patents instead of outright ownership, and shifted our next series of hires to fixed-term independent contracts with tight clauses. I revised my own compensation model to protect the foundation I'd started drafting. Angela reran projections with the new structure in place. It took 6 weeks, and when it was done, the company wasn't just safer, it was stronger. David called one afternoon while I was reviewing supplier audits. I just wanted to say, he began, "I've seen a lot of clients after a high-stakes divorce. What you've done since is rare." I didn't say anything. "I've read the restructured bylaws," he added. "If someone tried to do what Kevin did now, they wouldn't even get through the front door." After we hung up, I walked outside and stood on the balcony. It was just past 5, and the lake below shimmered with early evening light. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath without feeling like I had to brace for something. Later that week, I called Margaret. "I think I'm ready," I said. "For what?" to build something that doesn't need to be defended, just grown. She didn't speak for a moment, then said, "Good. That's where the real work begins." Around the same time, I received an email from a university in California. They were building a new business accelerator focused on sustainable consumer goods. They wanted a keynote speaker to talk about resilience in leadership. I almost declined. Then I accepted. I flew out in March, stood behind the podium, told the story of ClearPath's first 3 years, just that part. Nothing about Kevin, nothing about betrayal or court filings. Just the truth about how long it takes to get your first contract, what it feels like to take out your retirement savings to buy packaging supplies, how you hold your breath when the first payroll run clears. Afterward, a woman in the front row came up and said, "I've been looking for someone who talks about the slow parts." "Thank you." I nodded. Back in Austin, I went to a small dinner hosted by one of our retail partners. They wanted to discuss a new regional expansion. The CEO, a woman named Janine, leaned in during dessert and said, "You're different than when we first met. Clearer, steadier." I didn't know how to answer, so I just smiled. On the drive home, I thought about what she said. And she was right. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. I wasn't wondering what was still broken. I was building forward. By April, the internal changes were finalized. The team had expanded. Our numbers were better than projected. Angela had hired 2 new analysts. Rachel had taken on a side project with a clean energy firm in Dallas. And I had drafted something I'd been thinking about since the night I got that conference flyer. A fund for women entrepreneurs. Not just seed capital, but legal support, licensing guidance, structural protection, the kind of armor I wished I'd had when I first started. I didn't name it after myself. I named it the Martinez Foundation for my mother's side, for the people who taught me to do things right, even if it took longer. We launched quietly, no press, just an internal announcement and a news section on our website. But within a month, the first applications started rolling in. The rest of the story, what it became, who it reached, and what it changed, that was still ahead of me. But I was ready. The first time Kevin saw the final divorce filing, he didn't say a word. He came to the mediation office with his lawyer, sat down across from me, and glanced once at the folder David had placed in front of him. No handshake, no smile. Just a short nod, like we were 2 people finalizing a business transaction we hadn't enjoyed. David cleared his throat. "Everything in here reflects the revised offer from last week. You'll find the itemized breakdown property summary and final asset division." Kevin's lawyer opened the folder, read through the first few pages, then leaned back without saying anything. Kevin didn't even pretend to look. His eyes stayed on me. "You're really not going to budge," he said. I looked at him for the first time since we'd entered the room. "You tried to steal half of my company." Kevin leaned forward. "You built that company during our marriage, in this state that makes it ours." David spoke calmly. "Community property applies to shared earnings, not intellectual property that predates the marriage. Your client contributed no labor, no capital, and no documented expertise." Kevin exhaled through his nose like he'd heard it all before. I picked up the pen, flipped to the final page, and signed my name. Then I slid the folder toward him. "You made your choice. Now I've made mine." For a second, Kevin didn't move. Then he pulled the folder toward him and signed. The final terms were a fraction of what he'd demanded. $2 million in cash, no royalties, and no equity in ClearPath or any of its subsidiaries. He walked away with the car he'd been driving and the furniture from the guest house. After the signing, he stood slowly and adjusted his jacket. "Guess you really did have it covered," he said, almost like he was amused. David stood up beside me. "This meeting is concluded." Kevin didn't look back. We exited through different doors. The next day, I walked into the ClearPath office and placed a signed copy of the final agreement into our legal archive. Angela saw me from her desk and followed me into the back hallway. "It's done. It's done." She didn't say anything else, just reached out, squeezed my hand, and went back to her office. That afternoon, I scheduled a team meeting not for updates or financials, but to thank the people who had kept the company running while I handled the storm behind the scenes. We sat in the break room over sandwiches and iced tea. I told them what had been settled, what had changed structurally, and where we were headed. "We're not just back to normal," I said. "We're better than we were." They nodded, listened, and then went right back to work. That's what I loved about them. Later that week, I passed Kevin in a grocery store parking lot. I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was longer, he looked thinner. He was alone loading a case of water into the back of a car that wasn't the one he'd driven during our marriage. He glanced up and saw me. His eyes met mine for half a second. Then he turned away. I kept walking. A few weeks after that, I ran into a former colleague of his at a business luncheon. She mentioned in a quiet voice that Lisa had left the marketing agency and moved to Florida. Something about a reset, she said. Kevin tried to pitch a few consulting gigs, but I don't think it panned out. I nodded and changed the subject. At home, the house felt different now. Not empty, just honest. The rooms felt lived in, not staged. I got rid of a few pieces of furniture that Kevin had insisted on buying things that never felt like me. I moved my office downstairs where the light was better. Rachel brought over new throw pillows and a second-hand lamp that reminded me of my mother's kitchen. Angela and I started meeting every Friday afternoon to review foundation applications. Some were from early-stage founders, others from women who'd left corporate careers to build something of their own. We set up a mentorship program and brought in legal partners to help with incorporation patents and contracts. The first woman we funded was named Camille. She'd invented a plant-based disinfectant formula in her garage while raising 2 kids and working part-time at a hospital. Her first samples were mixed in mason jars. Her margins were rough. Her distribution plan needed work. But the science held. We flew her out to Austin and walked her through a full strategic plan. When she left 3 days later, she hugged me tight. "You gave me back time," she said. "I didn't even know how much I'd lost." Rachel printed the photo of us together and taped it to the office wall. "Let's fill the whole row," she said. By the end of the year, we had 10 portraits, then 15, then a waiting list. The foundation took off faster than we expected. A tech journal wrote a feature piece about our model. Then, a climate action nonprofit invited us to speak at their summit. Camille came too. She stood on stage beside me, smiling like someone who had just stepped into her real life. And somewhere in all of that, I realized I wasn't waiting for the next bad thing. I wasn't checking behind every curtain or second-guessing every signature. The fear had quieted. The structure I'd built held. And one morning in early spring, while walking through the production floor, I heard one of the newer staffers say I applied here because I knew the founder doesn't play games. I didn't stop to correct him. He was right. The courtroom wasn't packed, but every seat behind the barrier was filled. Half were reporters, local business outlets, a few industry blogs, one national legal podcast. The rest were spectators, some from my own company, some who had followed the divorce headlines, a few probably just curious. Kevin had tried to avoid court entirely. For weeks, his lawyer pushed to settle through mediation. But when David revealed what we'd uncovered, fraudulent expense reports, misused corporate cards, and over 100 deleted messages tied to Lisa's agency, they backed down. The court date was set. It was a civil hearing asset fraud misrepresentation of marital contributions and breach of fiduciary responsibility under the Community Property Code. We weren't here to drag anyone. We were here to prove what had happened and make the record public. Kevin arrived in a gray suit that didn't quite fit. His lawyer, a younger man with a slick portfolio and not much trial experience, followed him into the front row. Kevin didn't look at me. David stood beside me and opened with a brief, steady summary. "We will show Your Honor that Mr. Sterling knowingly falsified financial documents, misled business partners, and concealed personal transactions to claim legal stake in an enterprise he neither built nor supported." The judge nodded. "Proceed." They called Angela first. She brought documentation, travel receipts, meeting calendars, invoice logs, all showing who had done what and when. Then came our accounting lead, then our IP attorney. Each one confirmed the same thing: Kevin had contributed nothing to the growth of ClearPath. No strategy, no capital, no labor, just proximity. Then it was my turn. David walked me through my timeline, how the company had formed, when our early investment arrived, the scope of Kevin's involvement or lack thereof. Then came the discovery. "How did you first learn about the falsified statements?" David asked. I answered plainly. When I reviewed shared account access logs, I noticed irregularities tied to Kevin's device ID. And what did you find? Expense reimbursements labeled as company dinners, charged to a marketing agency he wasn't employed by. Payments issued to a consulting firm registered under Lisa's name. Hotel stays logged under our business development budget. Did he have permission to access these accounts? No. Did he notify the company of any business involvement? Kevin's lawyer objected. Speculation. The judge raised an eyebrow. The witness is stating direct observation, not opinion. Overruled. Next, David presented a set of internal messages, time-stamped, archived, and printed. These emails, he said, demonstrate that Mr. Sterling and his associate plan to exploit the company's asset growth through marital claims. The room went quiet. The judge asked to see the originals. He read in silence for almost a full minute. Then he looked up. "Have these documents been verified?" David nodded. "By both parties' forensic teams. The metadata is intact." Kevin shifted in his seat. Then David asked the court to call Lisa Jenkins. The courtroom door opened. Lisa walked in slowly in a navy dress and flats. She didn't look at Kevin. She raised her right hand, and gave her statement. Under oath, she confirmed the affair. She confirmed Kevin had promised her a stake in ClearPath if the divorce settlement went through. She confirmed she had helped him fabricate marketing records to back up his consulting claim. And she confirmed that when the plan fell apart, Kevin told her to cut ties and say nothing. "Why are you coming forward now?" David asked. She looked down. "Because he told me I was disposable, and I believed him. But then I saw the documents she had. I knew I was about to be named anyway. I didn't want this on my record." David nodded once. No further questions. The judge turned to Kevin's attorney. Cross-examination. The young lawyer glanced down at his notes, then shook his head. "No questions at this time." Lisa stepped down. The judge made a few marks on the folder in front of him, then leaned back. "We'll reconvene tomorrow for closing statements." Court adjourned. I stood slowly. My hand felt steady. My knees did not. Rachel met me outside the building. She didn't ask what had happened, just handed me a bottle of water and opened the passenger door. The next morning, the courtroom was even fuller. Someone from a national finance blog had shown up. A woman from a business ethics committee sat near the back. David gave a short closing. "This case is not about a broken marriage. It is about a deliberate attempt to claim ownership of work, not done risk, not taken, and value not earned." The judge spoke for less than 10 minutes. He found Kevin's claims unsupported by evidence. He dismissed his motion for spousal equity. He entered a formal reprimand for financial misrepresentation and referred one of the charges for further review under civil fraud. Then he looked directly at Kevin. "You are fortunate this case was limited to dissolution. If this had been brought as a business dispute, the consequences would be more severe." Kevin didn't respond. Court adjourned. Final. Outside, someone from the press tried to approach. David blocked the camera politely. No comment. Angela texted a photo later that afternoon. Our staff gathered in the break room with a cake that said, "Built, not borrowed." I smiled and sent a thumbs up. That night, I sat out on the back porch with a glass of tea, listening to the wind. I didn't feel triumphant, just still. Whatever happened next wouldn't be about defending anymore. It would be about choosing. The annual ClearPath Board Summit was always held in May. We flew everyone in Investors Department heads, 2 of our external advisors. It wasn't formal like a shareholder meeting. No suits, no podiums, just a round table in a bright conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a long oak table we'd had custom-built the year before. The agenda was simple: review the past year, present the growth forecast, and discuss new initiatives. This year, I'd saved something for the end. Angela opened with operations. Then came finance, then product strategy. By the time it was my turn, the room was quiet, focused, ready. I stood. Before we wrap, I said I'd like to share something we've been building quietly. I clicked the remote, and a short video began playing on the screen behind me. Faces filled the frame: founders, scientists, small business owners, all women, all grantees of the Martinez Foundation. Camille appeared first, then a biotech chemist from Arizona, a solar technician from Tennessee, a circular packaging startup from Wisconsin. Each of them spoke for a few seconds about what they'd built, what the support had made possible, what they were doing next. When the video ended, I let the room stay quiet for a moment. "We've funded 37 ventures so far," I said. "By next year, that number will double." A woman from our advisory team leaned forward. "Is this being spun off?" "No," I said. "It stays under the ClearPath umbrella. But it will have its own governance structure and dedicated team. We're not just a brand anymore. We're a platform." One of our original investors, a man who'd written the first $50,000 check 7 years ago, cleared his throat. "And you're running it, I'm overseeing it," I said. "But Rachel's taking the lead, with full budget authority." Rachel looked up from the end of the table and gave a quiet nod. That's when the man beside her, someone who had once questioned whether Rachel was ready to manage her own team, leaned back and said, "She's earned it." Angela smiled from her seat across the table. After the meeting, one of our newer board members approached me near the coffee cart. "I heard about the court case," she said quietly. "You didn't let it shake the foundation." "No," I said. "We reinforced it." She nodded once and walked away. Later that evening, we hosted a dinner on the rooftop of a downtown hotel. Nothing fancy. String lights, buffet line, acoustic music in the background. Camille was there along with 6 other founders. One brought her daughter. Another brought a sketch pad filled with product ideas. David showed up toward the end. He stood beside me at the edge of the terrace watching the lights stretch across the city. "This is what it was for," he said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Just before dessert, I was asked to speak. I walked to the mic, glanced at the faces around me, new team members, original staff, old friends, new ones, and spoke from the same place I'd built the company. We didn't start ClearPath to compete. We started it because there was a better way to do this work, more honest, more sustainable, more humane. And it turns out when you build something strong, you don't have to scream about it. You just keep building. I paused, then added, "We've spent the last year cleaning up a mess someone else left behind. But look around. We're still standing, still growing. And now we're reaching further." There was no applause, just a quiet kind of agreement, the kind that settles into a room like stone. After the speech, Camille came up and gave me a hug. "I want to be where you are one day," she said. "You will be," I told her. As the night wound down, I stood beside Rachel by the edge of the terrace, both of us holding plates we never got around to eating. "You remember when we used to run payroll in your garage?" she asked. I remember hoping the checks wouldn't bounce. She smiled. I like this version better. The lights below blinked red and gold. The wind shifted. I looked around the rooftop faces. I trusted a team that held a business that wasn't just stable, but full. I didn't know what Kevin was doing now. I didn't ask. I didn't check. Whatever had once pulled me back toward that past was gone. A few weeks after the summit, I found myself walking the trail near Lake Travis again. Same path I used to take when things felt too heavy to carry indoors. But this time I wasn't escaping anything. I just wanted to move, to breathe. There's a bench near the overlook weathered wood faded plaque. Nothing fancy. I used to sit there when the house was still full of tension, when I couldn't hear myself think over Kevin's voice and the noise in my own head. I hadn't stopped there in a long time. But that morning I did. I sat with my coffee and watched the sun come up over the water. Quiet. Still. No agenda. No planning. Just light on the lake and a little breeze in the trees. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my jacket. It was a letter from my mother. I'd found it weeks ago, tucked in a box I hadn't opened since she passed. Written in her careful handwriting, signed with her full name, Luisa Martinez. It wasn't long. Just a reminder that life doesn't always reward the loudest person in the room. Sometimes it honors the one who stays, who listens, who builds. I reread it slowly, then folded it back up and tucked it into my bag. That afternoon, I met Rachel for lunch. She'd just come from a foundation pitch session and looked like someone who'd found her rhythm. Camille's hiring her 4th employee, she said as she sat down. And that biotech founder from Arizona. She landed a grant from the DOE. I smiled. You keeping score, always. She paused, then looked at me. So, what's next for you? I didn't have a clean answer. There wasn't a big launch ahead. No lawsuit to fight. No speech to write. I think I'm just going to keep going, I said. Quietly. She nodded. That sounds exactly right. That evening, I got home to a small package on the porch. No return label. Just my name handwritten. Inside was a photo taken years ago at one of our early ClearPath events. Me, Angela, and Rachel standing in front of a booth we'd built ourselves the night before. I didn't even know someone had taken the shot. Underneath it was a note. We started with duct tape and folding tables. Now look at us. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I placed the photo on the mantel beside the others, not as a trophy, just as a reminder of what happens when you keep showing up, when you build something the right way even when no one's watching, when you don't let someone else's destruction define your direction. My life doesn't look how I thought it would, but it's honest, it's mine, and it's still unfolding. If this story reminded you of a season you survived or a strength you didn't know you had, take a moment to share it in the comments. Someone else might be waiting to hear they're not alone. And if you're still in the thick of it, still sorting through what to keep and what to leave behind, just know this. It gets clearer and quieter, and you'll know when it's yours again.